So, hi.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, Bergen. It is lovely to see the James Merrill hidden study of 107 behind you. It's very nostalgic.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks so much. So this is my new book. It's called The Math Campers.
My own novel. It's called These Women.
It looks like this.
Well, the first thing I'll say is all the dreams are actual dreams. There's nothing worse than a fabricated dream. You can always tell.
I normally don't write in first person because of the fact that as soon as you have a narrator, you tend to have somebody listening, or there's an implied audience.
I just got to soak up in the atmosphere in that house. You just feel like a writer, and you feel like you're part of this tradition in a community, and it feels like the work is important.
Magical things happen when you're looking at Merrill's books.
Well, it was a really, really transformative residency for me. It might sound like a bit of an overstatement, but it really wasn't.
Merrill's really distinct imagination was present in every detail.
Thanks, Bergen. Bye. Enjoy Stonington on my behalf.
The first writers in residence came to the James Merrill House 25 years ago, shortly after James Merrill's death in 1995. Since then, over 80 writers have visited, staying in his home, a National Historic Landmark, to work on projects of their own. Thanks to Merrill's generosity, the house now belongs to the Stonington Village Improvement Association and is an ongoing inspiration for writers and poets from around the world. For more information, visit our website, jamesmerrillhouse.org. Thank you.
Welcome to the James Merrill House virtual reading with our Merrill House poet in residence, Desiree C. Bailey. It is my pleasure to welcome Desiree this afternoon to our series. My name is Annie Philbrick, a new member to the Merrill House committee in April of this year. I am the owner of 3 independent bookstores in southeastern Connecticut: Bank Square Books in Mystic, Savoy Bookshop and Cafe in Westerly, Rhode Island, and Title IX in New London, Connecticut. I have been a fiction judge for the National Book Awards and Kirkus Awards and served 6 years on the board of the American Booksellers Association. I'd also like to provide some background on the Yale Younger Poets Prize. James Merrill was a judge for the Yale Younger Series of Poets from 1983 to 1989. Desiree was chosen by Carl Phillips, who is currently on our advisory board. We now have the tradition that the winner of the Yale Younger Poet Prize gets automatic residency in the month of June at the Merrill House, and next summer is Robert Wood Lynn. Books published by the residents of the Merrill House are available on the Merrill shelf at Bank Square Books. You can find the titles on the Merrill House website, and the next event is August 21st with poet Armin Guddian. I just would like to say one personal thing. If you are looking for a Father's Day present for tomorrow at the last minute, Hillary and Bill Clinton stopped in at the Savoy Bookshop in Westerly today. And Bill, who is writing his second thriller with James Patterson, graciously signed all the copies that we have. And so if you need something, we have signed copies by Bill Clinton. Just a little side note. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge that today is Juneteenth, now a nationally recognized federal holiday. The first one since Martin Luther King Day was acknowledged in 1983. I read parts of this book by Annette Gordon-Reed this weekend on Juneteenth. It's only 141 pages, and it will enlighten you in a few hours. Desiree will speak more on this new day in our world later on during her reading. Desiree C. Bailey is the author of What Noise Against the Cane. What a title. It just speaks so much. Yale University Press, 2021, which was selected by Carl Phillips as the winner of the 2020 Yale series of Younger Poets Prize, as I mentioned. She is also the author of the fiction chapbook In Dirt or Salt Water, O'Clock Press, 2016, and has short stories and poems published in Best American Poetry, Best New Poets, American Short Fiction, Callaloo, the Academy of Poets, and elsewhere. A recipient of awards from the New York State Council on the Arts, New York Foundation for the Arts and Poets and Writers. Desiree was born in Trinidad and Tobago and grew up in Queens, New York. She is currently an English teacher in Brooklyn, New York. So welcome to Desiree, and I will turn it over to her. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annie, for that beautiful introduction, and also for recognizing that today is in fact Juneteenth and that it's now a nationally recognized holiday. The thing that I've been thinking about and that so many folks have been thinking about when it comes to Juneteenth is that it is a day for Black Americans to celebrate emancipation. And in so many other parts of the world, for instance, in Trinidad, we have a day called Emancipation Day that does exactly this. And so it feels great to have a day like this in the States. And I think so many of us are really calling for this day to move beyond a symbol, to move beyond performance, and that an acknowledgement of Juneteenth should also be coupled with advocating for teaching Black histories and literatures, philosophies in the classrooms, which we know is currently under attack in some parts of the country, and also advocating for Black rights, whether it's securing voting rights, whether it's standing against state-sanctioned violence or police brutality or gentrification. And so, I think it's so great to have this day, and that it should also be coupled with action. And, so my book, What Noise Against the Cane, which I'll be reading from today, is also thinking about liberation. And part of the book, the first half of the book, is set during the Haitian Revolution. And it is told in the voice of a young woman who is enslaved and who is really thinking about what it means to be free. And so I'll, talk more about that perhaps after I read. But at this point, I would like to get into the reading. And so I'll read a bit from that section, and then from the second half of the book, which is set during contemporary times. And so I'll start at the beginning with a long poem called Chant for the Waters and Dirt and Blade. I am I, but I won't spill my name. Not here on this damned rock, pushed out bloody from the bowels of the sea. Marketplace Island, where the clouds crest and birdsong all for sale. Prophet of my black, my stewed puss on the plate, in the belly of my captor. What am I? What dare I? Grease up to quiet the squeak, a howl camouflage destined to burst forth, murderous as a wave, meek today, tomorrow cup for my inheritance of rage. My name soldiers up like bile, but I dare not allow it, swallow it, bury it, down with the other human parts of me. I, husk of girl, orphaned at the ocean's distant edge, before ship, before humid choke of hull, before trade winds splintering me off into the world's directions, a girl, and I, unbroken and spotless, smooth as obsidian's kiss. Until I can eat what my hands have made, I am a castaway, a hound's hound tied up, skin gnawed down, gleam of bone in the arrowed sun. What kind of life we do and do, till, clear, dig, grind, months, years measured by cane. melody of home, a ruthless drift, a song that doesn't return. I dream the sea scabbed over, a hush across her blue-black lips, the scaled mother below circling, swimming the wound, the scaled mother hurling her body against the crust of hurt, pickaxe of tail and spine until there, an opening. Oh, my forgetful singe love, our sea is not, can never be the wound. We shadows beneath shadows, stone interred in stone, I somebody, I daughter of seagrass. I don't always remember when the whole flings its dirt against the coming dark. My hands, my womb, whittled to a tool, to build what? A white man's skull temple, his leaning empire of ash and bone, his coffee, his cane arrows towards the death of everything the land chewed up, the skinned forest, his god was in the vulture's jaw, the island made into a wicked stain, a lump in the throat of my mother. But if not here, then where? Crude shadow of home. My blood, my grief glistens the soil. The land and me stubborn kin. The land made me a new being, forge of a greedy flame. My blood already here. My God's breathing in the hills, in the slow tilt of evening. My God stir me into a battle song. My muck, my cane, my muddy island, my life, my death, my cliffs, my body's bloom. They will say miracle when what they mean is thirst, tongue jettying, awaiting runaway fist of rain. Miracle when what they mean is war song learned by limb before the capture, sweet mixing of herb before the capture, soldiers head knotted with coordinates, strategy of flame, the haunt, the memory of how the bird taunts the river with its wing, and a sweet free thrust in a moon-drunk room, juices seeping into mattress, into coconut fiber, fermenting. Miracle of breath and blood, miracle of a haunting. Freedom never forgets where it once roamed, stalks me till I can't sleep for want of the sea, till poison floats like a fly in the tea. Freedom, ruthless siren, hurl and shriek louder than a dream. What smoke, what threadbare cry, what child strung between, what architects of light, what leaf for the wound, what mountain and scar, what keloid, what mother, what sweat in the eye, what sojourning soul, what thrust in the dark, what hole, what belly, what babe without breath, what route to the hills, what dance, what drumbeat to call, what freedom, what body, what precipice of hope, what danger, what master, what whalebone, what poison meat, what pillage field, what noise against the cane, what blaze, what sky, what name to call myself. And so those are selections from the poem Chants for the Water and Dirt and Blade. And I'm going to read a few poems now from the second half of the collection. And at this point, I'm really just, I think, vibing and seeing which poems speak to me. And I would like to start this section with a poem called La Divina Pastora, Mother of Miracles. And I wrote this in honor of a representation of the Virgin Mary in a town called Siparia, which is a neighboring town, a town neighboring where I'm from in Trinidad. And so the statue is a dark-skinned Virgin Mary, and she is worshipped by both Catholics and Hindus in a Catholic church. And so in this poem, I really wanted to not only honor, I think, the spirit of the statue and of the Virgin Mary and of different cultures coming together and worshiping in a shared space, but also to think about what we ask of our deities, especially our, our women deities. And so here's the poem. We cast our burdens down at the feet of the Black Mother, us of myriad stripes, Hindu and Catholic, junctioned by her body here in the southwest of Trinidad. La Divina Pastora, of disputed origin, like all women blessed or caught in the latitudes of conquest and myth. Once a girl who grew to a woman before nightfall. Once a statue sprung from soil of cacao, patron saint of Siparia gowned in white and gold, bestowing us with sight or husbands or whatever we ask. We ask day in and out, sweaty pilgrims with our hard-won nuts, our battered backs, our tears and haberdashery. Madonna Murty speaks to me through her burglar-proof glass, and in the creep of memory, I lock the bedroom door against the handyman's routine gaze. I shield my pubescent body. She too, mother of miracles with her own memories, coin offerings pocketed, rosary snatched, crown rushed to pawn shop, dress hem sullied by the traffic of hands. She too trapped in her protection, caged against the muck, the world's leaking desires. We ask and she gives. We wrong her and she lets us cry out her many names. Divine shepherdess, Suparimai, Black virgin who once roamed banana leaves and blooms of Tulsi. We gather in procession down Cora Road on Good Friday. We bring our children to share their first hairs. We litter the altar with rice, jewelry, flowers, olive oil. We fill her cup to lip, think its flood climbs close to her worth. But by what measure? Whose thirst? And the next poem that I will read is called Guesswork. True, there is no homeland, just my vain feet wandering the shore, marring paradise, regretful inconvenience I am, smudged in the eye of a tourist camera. Vagrant is what I learned to call the man with snarl of sky for a roof, and how now that word turns inward, taking roots within the spleen. I am not lost, or am I? Light a white candle, says a friend, his pupils storming within mine. Neighbor it to a glass of water, flame and water to uncover a path, to greet the ones who walked moons before. Damn near atheist on so many days, but I touch the flame to the wick and my head is light, light it's lifting. Diasporan daughter raking the soil for a map, a glint of my mama's gold, a bone to call my own. See me, saga gyal and kente pom pom shorts, thigh shea buttered, Fulani hoops twisting a secret beside my face. I fix my mouth to say black girl. I twist my tongue to say magic. Yet when the day turns, I scorn this empty-bellied scavenging, the traditions fumbled, then swirled to mud. I want to say I am from nowhere and everywhere, but that feels coy, like I am lifting my skirt for the empire's gaze. Even if it is true, on my papers and certificates, there's a country and another country. I can reach beyond, trace the soils through a strand of hair or swab of cheek. But what after? Forever of lineage riven and ruptured, So I search only because I can. And sometimes I exist more and more each day, a brown cotton doll stuffed and stitching the X for her own inadequate eye. Okay, let's see. So this poem is called Extra Virgin Olive Oil, and I wrote it after a painting by Walter Price that I saw at the Studio Museum. And one of the things that you'll hear in the poem is that I thought that the subject was engaging in one activity, but she was actually reading a book, and so this poem will get into that. Maybe we'll talk about it at the end at some point in the Q&A. Look once, and it's her fingers that pull you in, the absence of them, how they've disappeared within her, splitting her body like reeds at the river's lips. Bantu knotted American queen pedestal at the top of the canvas. Spill of red paint, blue drip of stars, pooling the foot of the nation. Look again, not a clit, but a book that occupies the hand, and you smile at how easy it is to mistake one pleasure for another, membrane for membrane, twin yearnings for the flesh spit of knowledge. For after all, to know is to let the sweet waters run down, down the slope, the purple mountains. Stare until the painting becomes a mirror, until you are 16 again in your room with Jimi Hendrix plastered on the wall like a saint. You are clutching a book, blotting the ink with your sweaty palms, shoving the words into your mouth, practicing, repeating, drilling an American accent, the salt water off your tongue, speaking yourself into disappearance. And you would have disappeared were it not for the pussy's pages, how turning them lit the tunnel into yourself, to the books that could only be read in salt and seaweed, and the touch that made you crave your own dark scent, what tiny stars you are spilling. It's nice reading up here. By the way, right now I'm reading from the studio, and it's really nice because I get to hear the bird song. I'm hearing, I don't know, maybe a helicopter flying overhead. There's a banner. I can't see what it says, but it's nice to sort of, I think, be embodied in this way by the sounds that I'm hearing, especially reading virtually. Since I can't see you guys, it's nice to at least to hear the birds, to hear the sounds from the ocean, from the sky. So I just wanted to let you know what's happening on my end and what I'm hearing. This next poem that I will read is called Woman in Dub. I wrote this after a Lee Scratch Perry and Max Romeo song called Chase the Devil. Maybe some of you, if you were into dub music at some point, maybe you are familiar with this song. And in the chorus, the line is, I'm going to put on an iron shirt and chase the devil out of earth. And so I riff on that in this poem, and it is also my attempt to emulate the structures of dub music, which is known for reverb and echo, and using these technologies to create these various effects. The devil I see is the one I saw and nail out of fears, out of cycles of wound, dread calcifying into prophecy. I put on an iron shirt to face it, chase it, but the cup still piss drunk with power. I put on an iron shirt, but the men on the street surveil the nipple. Been hounding my punani since before I spilled my first blood. What a menace of a body I hurl blame to the husk. Is the devil real or is it of my fantastical making? The answer is not the matter. The fact of paranoia be the true violence. Warfare, the very presence of the question. I want to peer inward, to take a good look at the sound system, my heartbeat echoing out of my folkloric thirst, my desperate belief in other realities, a B-side where I'm abolished from emotional labor, aka Black woman's burden, free to surrender to my own madness, to sink down into the dub of it, stripped of my first voice, reverbing outside the pain of a body. Stripped of my first voice, down in the dub, cop hounds my blood into paranoia, a Black reality, cycle spilled, power husk, emotional woman, iron, real street, folkloric and mad, true. Take a good look at the devil, peer into the dread. Men surrender to wound, drunk, calcified, but I, fantastic, chasing echoes, nailed to system, free in sound. I, a fact, answer of my own making. And I'm going to read one more poem. This is the last poem of the collection, and it's called Chant for the Waters and Dirt and Blade, Slight Return. A memory of the cemetery flooded with the murmur of the living, the candles' small fires nesting on the graves. My grandfather and we, his thin-limbed offspring, every year in the humid dark, each All Saints' Day, the mosquitoes rising from the grasses to feed. Every year we light, we pray that our dead will not forget the chant below our skins. The scent of melting wax will always call forth the memory of our dead, the unheard footfalls, the bodiless rustling through the dasheen leaves. On this Hallows Eve, I am listening to the cars sounding their grievances on Flatbush Avenue, hemming while hemming words in my apartment, wishing that I could wake up tomorrow in my first country to visit what remains of my grandfather, to go to him, to the cemetery of his mother, his father, and the wax riding the damp air, its fragrance winding beyond the dark palm print of a bacano tree. Who, what, how do I believe? My worship colonized, my gods painted in a foreign face, my grief song milked in the raised woods, shipped off most wanted commodity. I stuff my ears against the old spirit's call, fearful of the way the past speaks to me. I cling to cold reason, but find empire's grasp especially there. I believe in what makes me free. I believe in the red hot flowers crowning the head of the flamboyant tree. I believe in nutmeg ground down for cassava pone and the firm singing hands that push its measurements through the decades. My goddess is the wave unsheathing, my name strung through the conch contralto. Where will we live? I ask my ocean-torn love. Where will we raise our children if my fibroid womb will allow? We of many soils, we who know the curse is the blessing is the curse. We of many and no homes, we who destroy and build, who send our love haunts along the currents, whether quick clapping of hands or hymns of lands and mercy, or fistful of cowrie thrown across a mat, or psalms to tread the lion and the cobra, or symbols drawn in cornmeal guarded throughout the brutal passage. I fear that I will never be fully at home, that the very first leaving cracked the skull of my belonging, that when I eventually stop moving, I won't understand the land's grieved tongue. I brown the sugar in the heavy bottom pot to fill up every space, to remind myself of language. I belong to the foam that singes the sand where I was thrown to the waves just weeks into the world. My eyes widening to limestone cliffs, to see almonds ripening upon the shore. My hands are the scarlet ibises soaring the salt-washed dawn, cleaving the sky open like a blade. Thank you all for listening to these poems. I'm actually not hearing you, Annie.
I took it off. Sorry, I was on mute. Desiree, that was just marvelous. There's so
Thank
much in
you.
there to unpack. It's just like I kept taking notes. I had to get up and go get a pen, and I was just taking notes. So many of that. I don't see any questions yet, but there are questions. We have questions. If anybody wants to put them in the chat, that would be great. So I have a really simple question to ask you, first of all. So enlighten me as to what is dub music.
Ooh, okay. So dub music.
Maybe I'm dating myself, but what is dub music?
No. So actually, dub music comes from Jamaica, and I would say it began maybe. I would say maybe I don't know, the 50s are too early, but the 60s and 70s, and so really, again, you're using all of these technologies to create different effects in the music, and of course, there's like a more technical, description of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't need the technical description now. But a key thing is that a lot of people confuse it with something called dubstep, which is more recent. It's separate, and so and so dub music definitely came about at a time, I think, when Jamaica was also these producers and musicians were trying to make do with the instruments that they had, and also it came about at a time when Jamaica was really dealing with neo-colonialism as well, and so all of these forces were converging at the time, and it's this really spirited expression, sometimes haunting, depending on, because you have these loops and these echoes and reverberations, and so it's really this, I think, a remarkable sonic experience.
Huh. Does it involve like steel drums and all of that, or is it just native indigenous instruments?
So not the steel drum, but so it's called dub because of the dubbing and the doubling that's involved there. But producers, I believe, would make a record, and then they would also make these instrumentals. That's, I guess, that was called like a dubbed version, and so the voice in that version, in the instrumental version, is stripped away. Other effects are stripped away, and so you are left with the instrumentals, and then the musicians, the producers, play with the instrumental, and so it's actually incredibly experimental. It's electronic as well, but in the original music, you will hear You will hear horns. You'll hear those like that recognizable reggae bass line. So one way to think about it is if you take a song that that you know and that you love, and you remove the vocals, you remove other aspects of it, but you add other things to it, and
Great.
and distort and stretch and play and experiment with it.
That's great. That's great. There's a couple questions, but I have another one before I forget. I wrote down about the Black Virgin Mary.
Yeah.
So I've been to Cuba like 4 times, and there is also a Black Virgin Mary, if I understand it, in a very, not in downtown Havana, but on the other side of the port. And I'm just curious if you want to speak a little bit more. I thought it was fascinating. Honestly, I mean, because also Cuba is down in that same region. So do you think, do many of the islands down there have a Black Virgin Mary that is a symbol within the different islands, or is it just, you were speaking about Hinduism and Catholicism that speaks to that, but I think, isn't there, I'm ignorant, but is there a little bit of voodooism there in that too, or am I in a different world?
So in particular with La Divina Pastora, so this saint is a part of the Catholic tradition, and so there's no connection with voodoo with La Divina Pastora.
Okay.
And actually, so there are a lot of different stories as to like the origin of the statue. And of course, the population in Trinidad, I say of course, but of course to me, but the population in Trinidad is largely of African and of Indian descent. So African because of the history of slavery, and then Indian because of the history of indentured servitude or indentured labor from India to the Caribbean. And so, you know, so it's interesting how this figure then is a way to reflect the population, and you have different faiths, I guess, worshiping at this one church, and maybe, you know, adding different aspects of their culture in this particular statue. But and so you know, it's really specific, I think, to Trinidad, and you know, I'm wondering, I would love to learn more about the saint, about the Black Virgin Mary in Cuba for sure. But absolutely in this book, I do really honor a lot of different Black spiritualities in here. And so while La Divina Pastora is not connected to voodoo, in the first poem, while writing this, I was thinking about the role of voodoo in the Haitian Revolution, and the fact that so much of the enslaved practiced it. Some of them practiced it alongside another religion as well, because it was a very diverse population, especially you know, since you know, the population coming from different parts of Africa, I mean, it was continuous. And so you had people who may have practiced Islam, for instance. It's a whole, I mean, that's a whole other aspect, but these are the things that I'm thinking about, and why, you know, I did want to highlight and think about Haitian voodoo in relation to the Haitian Revolution, and in relation to this poem, is because it is so demonized in a way that is incredibly anti-Black, both among people who are non-Black and Black people often. And so I think it is important to really examine that bias, and to ask ourselves, like, you know, what connections do we find with a religion, you know, that is demonized, that's also coming from the first Black Republic and, you know, a Black nation that freed itself from slavery.
Right. Well, that also, it's interesting that sort of in some ways ties back to Juneteenth and all of that. So what you're talking about. So in your writing process, I want to speak about that a little bit, but I also want to ask you, and I mentioned this earlier with you, is can you speak to the storyline at the bottom of the pages in your book, and what is that story? And is that I'm not a poet whatsoever, and so is that a structure that happens in poetry, or is that something that you created yourself? And can you just talk a little bit about what's happening at the bottom of the page in those words? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Annie, for that question. So at the bottom, so throughout the book, the entire book, there is one line of text that just runs alongside, runs along the bottom of the page. And yeah,
I'm showing
it. Yes, and so it's
oh, there it goes.
It's its own narrative. I'm actually gonna just read a little bit from that.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
Right?
That'd be wonderful. That'd be great.
And then I'll talk about it.
Okay.
So I'll read from the beginning part of it. Crow does fly high, but when he come down, ants does eat out the eye. And the breeze keep on blowing like she never even know crow name. And the ants love meat when it's sweetened by a great fall. Hear how the rain make music in the bones. Hear how she drum on the remains before washing it into my wide, wet mouth. My body spread out, squeezing the coast like a jammet. Yes, I's a jammet, and my chin up high. Drink and be drunk. Drink and drown, sinking down in my boneyard. You have to come correct when it comes to me. You have to touch me, praise me, treat me like a queen. So bring the duck, the white roses, white wine, and honey. Sweeten up my pum-pum, make my belly feel good. I here doing me, flowing how others always flow. But everybody does do what they want with me. Say that Izzy, Mayan, Mizuchi, and how Vina shell out herself from me. Say my body is all kind of king and beast. Even Miss Ting, Miss Poet, who thinks she writing me here. Give me this voice like a voice that she afraid to forget. Syntax cut up and ring up with Shadow Benny and Congo Pepper. So I gotta take the voice and make it sing. Make it roar like I hit in the peak of my pleasure. But oh God, that child is worried. That poet does ton and ton. She mind washed and a wave. So that is again alongside or along the bottom of the book, and I call it the sea voice. And at some point when I was working on the book, I knew that I had to bring in my imagining of the voice of the sea. And so one thing that I didn't say at the beginning of my reading was that the entire book really is a tribute to the sea, to the ocean, and for many different reasons. Of course, thinking about the Middle Passage, about that history of the transatlantic slave trade that occurred in the ocean, but also my own connections to it. Also growing up near the sea and, you know, leaving Trinidad at a young age and really thinking of the sea as a way to connect back to this place that I really miss and that I wanted to go back to. And so there's that. And I wanted to bring it in there. And the voice is, it's body, sometimes it's, you know, sexy, sometimes it's, you know, she's thinking about the various violences that that we have suffered through. She's thinking ecologically as well, and about you know, the destruction of the planet. And and also she's thinking about me too, right? Like the audacity that the poet has to even think that she can render this entity that's so immense and unknowable and powerful, sometimes gentle and healing, but incredibly destructive. And in that section that I read, you know, she's commenting on the fact that I, the poet, gives the sea this voice that's incredibly Trinidadian, that's really Caribbean. And, you know, and so she's like wondering, well, why does she give the sea this kind of a voice? What's going on there? So it was really, I think, emotional to write. Like it felt full body, but also a lot of fun in some ways. And one of the things is that I had to kind of experiment with this voice. And so although I had been thinking about it for a while and wrote some sections at different times, you know, it had to align with the amount of pages in the book. So it can never be done until the book actually done.
There is a structure that you have to deal with. There is a structure. You just can't go on and on and on. So,
yeah.
So
I don't know why I put myself through that.
No. But speaking of that structure and stuff, there's some questions. First of all, I just want to tell you, there was a friend of yours, Wilton Shareka.
Wilton Shareka, yes.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't pronounce it. So proud of you, Desiree. This is just an amazing feat. And then there's another question from Jeffrey Little and some other people that, and it sort of ties in the question I was going to ask about, like, do you go back to Trinidad and Tobago? When did you leave? Do you do historical research in order to write so what is your writing process for these poems? Does it just come from your belly and your heart? Or do you feel the need to go do research? Do you talk to your grandfather, or your grandmother, or where does the soul come from for this book?
Yes.
When you're writing, not just this book, but all your writing.
Yeah, that's really a rich question. And so I think it's a mixture of all of those things. And so, and it really depends on what the poem calls for. And so with the poems that, so for Chant, for the Waters and Dirt and Blade, of course, I really had to do a lot of reading about the Haitian Revolution. I also, and so a lot of what you find at first is information about the revolution as a war, right? But you have to sort of read a bit more, read more deeply, to find information about the way that people lived or about what they wore. And a lot of the research, you know, it's not necessarily represented on the page. I made a decision to kind of pull back so that I wasn't creating another historical text, but I really wanted the story and the words to shine. And so I think all writers do this actually, that the research is there. You remember it so that you can engage with the ideas that you are working with, and then you try your best to forget some of it as well. Right. And so there's a lot of research involved there. Also, yes, visits to Trinidad. I try to go back as often as I can. Obviously, with the pandemic, that
no, didn't go anywhere.
So yeah, exactly. So I was there just before, maybe 2 weeks before the pandemic was declared, and then haven't been back since. So hoping to be back once it's safe to do so, and once it's safe to travel to Trinidad. But I love that you mentioned speaking to family. And so that is also a huge, a large part of the research. So when my grandparents were alive, speaking with them, also speaking to my aunt, who I think of as like the family historian.
Yeah.
because she cared for a lot of the older folks, and so she knows a lot of their stories, and really just spending time, right, with people, with family, and I think so much. I really did put so much of myself and my questions into these poems, and so it really is just about spending time, I think, with the elders, with with the history in the forms that they appear. And actually, one last thing about research is that dance also became a part of the research for some of these poems, and especially again with the poem centered on the Haitian Revolution, I took Haitian folklore dance classes because I realized that there's a lot of storytelling in those dances. And there's a lot of the human aspects of revolution and of the way that people live that's transmitted and carried forth in these dances that may not be in a formal text.
Right. It seems like, anyway, but I think that you're writing about the Haitian Revolution, but you grew up in Trinidad and Tobago, and how all those islands have a connection through stories. They're all just connected. Can you speak to that a little bit about, just how do you feel in your world about how all the islands down are connected through stories?
Yeah. Well, I think we're connected in a very literal way through movement, through migration, for work, right? And so the Caribbean has always been a space of movement. So, for instance, my grandfather was born in Grenada. So many Trinidadians, in fact, have roots in Grenada. I also have family or roots in Barbados, and this is a story that continues today. People moving for whatever reason, and so there is that. There is also our shared history of colonization,
right?
And so, and you do find that you have even, I guess, smaller structures along language, and depending on who the colonizer was, right? So if you are a Spanish speaking island as opposed to an Anglophone, and so on and so
or
forth.
French or whatever.
Yes, exactly. So there's, I think, so much that binds us, and also a lot of things that separate us as well. But I really do hope, and I think we are at a moment again where we are looking for the similarities and the connections, and and hopefully can move together and support each other. Also, again, on a very practical level, when there is a disaster, you do have many of the nations mobilizing and supporting each other, like when there's an earthquake or a volcano. And so, yes.
Right. No, it's just, I think it's fascinating how they're all connected like that. So we only have a few minutes left, but in your writing process, so there's sort of a twofold question of, how did you become a poet? And do you have any words of wisdom to younger people who are aspiring to also be a poet and tell their story through those words? Do you have any thoughts on that? Just to wrap this up, just if there is. So
absolutely. I think sometimes I roll my eyes at myself, like when I want to say this, but I really do feel like I became a poet because I had to, right? And especially as like a young immigrant kid, feeling like not really knowing the depth of the emotions that I was experiencing, not having a name for that, for loneliness or sometimes depression, missing home. and not having a name for migration, immigration. Looking back, I can say that poetry was a way for me to express that and to have a companion that, that is always with me. And I would say to anyone who would like to write or is writing that it is an active decision that that you show up with the work, with the poems. I'm not going to say every day because that's not everyone's style, but that you slow down and that you make it a practice to look very closely, to listen very closely, to speak to people around you. I really do think that's the core of being a poet, being really observant and noticing the world around you. And then, of course, reading a lot. Just reading a lot
that's always it. Reading.
Yeah.
Whether you write nonfiction or fiction, is poetry or whatever, it's like reading. You find that. So that ties into, there was a last question from a woman. I'm sorry. I'm not going to, her last name is Peterson. Her first name is Van Decca, I think. I can't remember. But she said, your writing is very generous in how you put the picture and sounds into one's mind. Do you write with that in your mind for readers? Also, you're amazing. But like, do you have those pictures and sounds of your country and, of just trying to figure out how to put all those images in your brain and your mind, to put those into words?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's a question from Tandeka, who is in Cape Town. Yes, Cape Town, South Africa. Yes.
Oh, yes. Man. Okay. That's great. That's great. It's late over
there. Thank you so much for it is late.
I know. Good for you, girl. Go.
But that's such a beautiful question. So I do write with these images in mind. I also have to. So when I'm deep in that space, I need to articulate the poems, and so I this is why I can't go to a coffee shop to write. Like I have to be in my cave, in my own space, because I'm always saying it aloud, and I think that's also me kind of really paying attention to the rhythm, to the stresses, and making sure that it feels right to me and to my ear.
Yep. I think reading whatever you write aloud is so different than writing it on the page. Not only do you catch, even in fiction or non-fiction, not only do you catch like something that doesn't make sense, it just brings it sort of alive and brings it back into your world, that you kind of imagine it in your head and then you put it down. But when you read it aloud, I'm sure, especially with poetry, with the cadence and all of that, it just brings it alive. So Desiree, you are amazing. No, this was so wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time today to do this for the Merrill House. And I hope your time there and in Stonington has been rewarding and
it's been so
all
good.
of the above. And it's a very special place, and your work definitely merits the stay there. And I haven't met you in person. It's all been virtual, which we're all getting really tired of, but here we are. So
here we
are. And I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time and being there and being part of the Merrill House residency. So good luck with the rest of your work. And it's been a real pleasure to speak with you tonight.
Thank you so much, Annie.
Thank you.
So, hi. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, Bergen. It is lovely to see the James Merrill hidden study of 107 behind you. It's very nostalgic.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks so much. So this is my new book. It's called The Math Campers.
My own novel. It's called These Women.
It looks like this.
Well, the first thing I'll say is all the dreams are actual dreams. There's nothing worse than a fabricated dream. You can always tell.
I normally don't write in first person because of the fact that as soon as you have a narrator, you tend to have somebody listening, or there's an implied audience.
I just got to soak up in the atmosphere in that house. You just feel like a writer, and you feel like you're part of this tradition and a community, and it feels like the work is important.
Magical things happen when you're looking at Merrill's books.
Well, it was a really, really transformative residency for me. It might sound like a bit of an overstatement, but it really wasn't.
Merrill's really distinct imagination was present in every detail.
Thanks, Brendan. Bye. Enjoy Stonington on my behalf.
The first writers in residence came to the James Merrill house 25 years ago, shortly after James Merrill's death in 1995. Since then, over 80 writers have visited, staying in his home, a National Historic Landmark, to work on projects of their own. Thanks to Merrill's generosity, the house now belongs to the Stonington Village Improvement Association and is an ongoing inspiration for writers and poets from around the world. For more information, visit our website, jamesmerrillhouse.org. Thank you.